Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Baumhauer's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa. It's another edition of the Nick Saban Show, presented by Alpha Insurance. I'm Eli Gold. To my immediate right, Ben Jones from the Tuscaloosa News. Great to have him as our special media guest. And to Ben's right, the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Coach Nick Saban. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I am well, thank you. And everybody excited about this weekend's game. But you know what's funny? I was on a talk show this morning. And the guy said to me, he said, I don't care what anybody says. He said, you guys have just got this season already wrapped up. And I said, you're crazy. I said, you're insane. I said, do you not respect what these other teams have? He said, don't give me that, yada, yada. How tough is it to convince the world, let alone your team, that this is far from over? This is a heck of a team you're facing this weekend.
Well, I really don't care about convincing the world. I do care a lot about convincing our team. And, you know, I think the main thing is very simple. You know, the main thing has to be the main thing, and that's how you play. You know, arrogance is never going to win a game.
Yeah.
Records, whatever your record is now, is not going to help you win the next game. Crowds don't score points. Stats don't catch passes. Newspapers don't run the ball. Fans don't block and tackle. So, you know, it really comes down, your security as a football player comes down to your ability to perform and to a standard. And, you know, you really don't want to let your teammates down. So that means that, you know, there's one play in a game where you loaf. There's one play in a game where you miss an assignment. There's one play in a game where you make a mental error, miss a tackle, or drop a pass. And that could, you know, affect the outcome of the game.
Sure.
And you don't want to be that guy. And I sure don't want you to be that guy. So as a coach, I'm always trying to help you get to where you can play to that standard, and don't want them to be the one, and you'd like for them to be the one that makes the difference in the game in a positive way. So it all comes down to guys' ability to stay focused and perform. You know, I talked to the players this week a lot about self-evaluation. You know, and there's really three things that you can self-evaluate, and we all should do this, and some people have a hard time doing this. Self-awareness. You know, what kind of effort are you giving? Are you really giving your best effort to be the best you can be? It doesn't matter what you choose to do. But in our case, being a football player, you know, contributing to your team, how can you evaluate how you stay focused, pay attention to detail in everything that you do? I'm not talking about just in practice. I'm not talking about just, you know, in a meeting. I'm talking about if you're watching film, getting ready for the game, whatever it is. And then do you have the knowledge to go out there and do your job? Mm-hmm. And so effort, are you giving your best? Can you stay focused even when you don't feel like staying focused? And you can't have mental lapse, because that becomes a habit. If you do it in practice, you're going to do it in the game. Then you're going to be the guy that makes a mental error when it matters. And can you go out there and do your job? Do you have the knowledge and experience to know how to do it, what to do, how to do it, why it's important to do it that way? So these are the things that we stay focused on. And I've given up on a lot of you folks out there, and Eli and everybody else, thinking we're going to win every game, and not thinking the other team's not all that good, because these guys we're playing are pretty good, and we're going to have to play, you know, damn good to beat them.
That's why they're number 3 in the country, no doubt about that. Let's get a question here from Ben. Let's open it up, sir. Go right ahead.
Right. On Monday, we talked a little bit at your press conference about what your time at LSU was like and how valuable that experience was. I was curious, since that was the first time you coached college football in that part of the country, what did you learn about coaching college football in the South then?
Well, you know, I think the biggest thing is the passion that the fans have is much different than it was coaching in the Big Ten or coaching up north. I think the second thing is how competitive recruiting is. And I do think that there were more good teams. There were more balance in the league. You know, most of the time when we played in the Big Ten, there was maybe 2 or 3 pretty good teams, and then the other teams didn't quite match up. But the depth of the conference was so much greater here. You had to play week in and week out, and you could never really let up because you might have 1 or 2 teams that weren't good enough to beat you. So those are probably the things that I learned about the Southeast Conference and coaching in the South. But I think all those things really make it more fun. There's more passion. There's great enthusiasm everywhere you go and play. And we have great enthusiasm and great fans here, so that makes it special to be the coach here. And I think the players really enjoy it. And if you really are a great competitor, you love games like this. So that's why you come to Alabama to play in games like this. And so it's going to be, a great challenge for us.
It is going to be just that. We've got Pee Wee on the phone, Coach. As per usual, our first question of the evening via the telephone, and he is sponsored, or at least the first caller is, although it's gotten to be Pee Wee for that matter, sponsored by Alabama 811. Contact 811 before you dig to know what's below. Call 811 or visit al811.com. Pee Wee, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Coach. How are you, sir?
Good, Pee Wee. How you doing?
I'm doing well. First, I'd like to say I hope that you had a good birthday yesterday and was able to spend some quality time with your lovely bride. I hope that worked out for you, sir.
Yeah, I did. When I got home last night, about 7:30, she actually cooked. It's once a week, but it was good. So it was good. I had to bring my own birthday cake home, though. That was kind of, self-delivery, I guess. That's a new deal. But we had a good time, and it was really fun for me. I always enjoy it. The players had a little birthday party when we come into team meeting, and I don't know if they do it because it's my birthday or because they're just trying to eat up some of the meeting time. It's probably because they want to eat up some of the meeting time, but it's a lot of fun. We had a big birthday cake, and it said, "Take it to the limit one more time," which was, kind of interesting that that's what they chose. So, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, Coach, you always talk about on a bye week that it's an opportunity to get some guys that are nicked up, get them a little well, a chance to get back to the fundamentals to kind of improve. I was just wondering how that went along this week. Did we get some guys well to be able to help us provide a little bit of depth, not just on the offensive line or in the offense, but for the whole team everywhere? And how was the focus and everything for this bye weekend, this week in preparation for LSU?
Well, it's like I talked about last week. You want to try to create momentum, when you have a bye week, so you build on helping your players rest, get some guys healthy, but also when they are practicing, they're practicing in a way that is helping them improve and gain confidence. So I was pretty pleased with the way we did that. I really was. We've had a pretty good week this week. But we still got, Smitty's practiced, and, I'm hopeful that he'll be very close to 100% by game time. Jalen was able to practice a little bit today, but, he's going to be, he's limited a little bit still, but he's getting well very rapidly now. He's kind of turned the corner a little bit. But other than that, most of the other players, they were nicked up, and, they're all a little better for having a little time off, and hopefully we'll be able to finish strong because it's going to be really important.
Pee Wee, thanks for your call, sir. Now, Coach, to your right, a visitor here at Baumhower's with a question. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hey, Coach. Thank you for taking my question. My question is, during a week like this with a big away game coming up, and, how do you balance your schedule between your dedication to the team, which I obviously have coaching at your level, and then also with family too? How do you keep the players focused, and then also split that time with your family and, take care of yourself?
Time management.
Yeah, it's, I don't think it really changes from week to week. I think it takes the same. I sit up here every week, and every game is a big game, and that game that week is the biggest game. So if there was a better way to do it, we'd have been doing it 3 or 4 weeks ago. We sort of have the same sort of plan every week in terms of how we get the players ready. We always get a theme for the psychological part of it that we start on Monday, talk to them each day through the week, and then tomorrow I speak to the team when we have our team meeting to get started. It's at 12:30. So, and then there's a physical planning part of it in terms of us preparing as coaches for what we have to, let's say, defend if we're on defense, what we have to attack if we're on offense, how we're going to do it, how we're going to teach the players to do it, how we're going to install it, how much we want to change from one week to the next. So, but the time is the same. The time on Sunday is always the same, and I don't have very much time with my family. I mean, Terry and I have a little bit of time Sunday morning. We go to church on Sunday. We always have family dinner on Sunday night for all of our coaches and their kids, so they get to see their kids for half hour or whatever, on Sunday. But I get home probably at 10 o'clock at night. I get 10 o'clock at night on Monday. Terry's sleeping on the couch. Tuesday. Wednesday I do get home. That's the only night I get home to eat. Sometimes the kids come over, so we look forward to that. And, tonight I'll go home after we make a couple more recruiting calls. So it's kind of, you don't have a lot of time, so you try to make the most of the time that you have. And you pretty much give up on all any personal thing that you enjoy doing. It's do your job, do it well for the players, and the little bit of time you have with family, you try to make the most of that, and that's about it. I mean, there isn't any time to, play golf or do anything that you enjoy doing, and you don't even think about it. I enjoy my job, so I guess that's the fun of the season.
Thanks for your question. Coach, a couple of straight football questions. One comes from the AL.com Nick Saban radio show blog. Adam in Cabot, Arkansas says, hey, Coach, we're getting really excited for the big game Saturday. What does Joe Burrow, the LSU quarterback, bring to the game as a QB that you haven't seen from the other quarterbacks you have played against all year? Thank you, and roll Tide.
Right. Well, I don't think it's fair for me to compare Joe to some other quarterback that we played against, but I will just talk about Joe. He's got good size. He's a good passer. He's got a strong arm. He's fairly accurate. He's deceptive with his feet. He's the third leading rusher on their team. He doesn't really look like a guy that can run, but he can run, and he is pretty fast, and he will pull the ball in the zone read and make you play honest. And the way they're playing offense right now, they have great balance. So they're able to run the ball. Their offensive line, even though they have 4 new starters, have done a really, really good job. They got 2 really good backs, and they run the ball, and they're going tempo, and they're going fast, which is unusual for what people expect to see from LSU. That really, Georgia was not ready for that at all. And, they hit him with a lot of big play runs, and then they have play action passes, and they throw a lot of deep balls, and he's a good deep ball thrower, and they've been able to make a lot of big plays. They got really big receivers. One guy's 6'7", another guy's 6'6". So they're good at the 50-50 balls, and they've made a lot of big plays off a play action pass down the field, and it's maximum protection, so you're really not going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback in 2- and 3-man routes. So, and they're really effective at it. So, and he's given them a lot of stability because he does a great job, I think. Every time you say a quarterback is a game manager, it's like he's not a good quarterback. But to me, you can't be a good quarterback if you can't manage the game well for your team. That means you get them in the right play. They don't have a lot of penalties. You play with poise. You make everybody around you play better because of the way you handle the situations. Whatever the word is for that, I think Joe does that for them, and I think that's something that's really helped their team and their confidence on their team.
On the other side of the ball, 14 interceptions. Is that because they have great athletes, or does Dave Aranda's defense or whatever do something a little different? Are they deceptive? How come so many interceptions?
Well, I think it's a combination of the both. They do have a really good scheme. I think Dave is a really, really good coach, probably one of the best defensive coaches in the country. I think they play a different kind of scheme in that they play 3-4 almost all the time, which creates a lot of different things for you to do in nickel when you play 3-4, because most people play a 4-2. So your blocking schemes, all those things changes. The way they pressure you change. The way they play coverage changes. I think the thing that they do a really good job of is they have good players. They all have good ball skills. That's why they make a lot of interceptions and are very athletic. But they do a lot of multiples on third down where they, disguise what they're doing, blitz guys from one side, rotate the coverage the other way, try to confuse the quarterback, and they've done a really good job of that, and they've, made a lot of picks because of it.
Yeah, it's paid off. Coach, we're going to break away and take care of a little business here. Then we'll come back. We'll get Ben to throw a couple of questions in your direction as you're listening to The Nick Saban Show. Tua stands in, throws long, Waddle behind the defense, right side 30, 15, 10, 5. How are you? Another one, 77 yards. Jalen Waddle. The freshman from Houston, Texas, named to the midseason freshman All-America team the other day, and he has really been, I think, Ben, we saw that in the preseason camp, in the fall camp. Everybody who at practice saw that this guy was going to be something special, and indeed Waddle is.
Right. He was a guy that we started to hear a little bit about almost as soon as fall camp started, and kind of built from there a little bit. I was a little bit skeptical at first. I'm a guy who kind of wants to see it before I'm willing to go out on a limb and say something, particularly about such a young player, but has played really well for Alabama this season.
He's done a heck of a job as we spend time with Coach Nick Saban on this Thursday evening. The Nick Saban Show, presented by Alpha Insurance. For the best agents in the business, call Alpha. Ben, when you go to Baton Rouge this weekend, how many column inches or how many articles or columns will you have to produce yourself?
Usually from a game, it's only a couple, but the trick for us, since we have a print deadline still, is that on a night game like this, particularly if it's a close game, it can be a challenge to get all of that done and in time to be printed in the next day's newspaper. Sometimes we'll actually have to turn part of what we're in at halftime to make sure that we have enough time to get the rest of it edited.
Interesting. The coach is with us. Why don't you jump in with another question?
Right. I was going to kind of circle back to something kind of related to what our guest asked in the first segment. There are a few careers out there, some probably more so than others, where I think it can be really important to have a spouse that's kind of on board with what you do. People in the military would certainly understand that, and probably people who go into the ministry and in religion would feel that way as well. How important are coaches' wives to what you guys do, and what are some ways that they help the program or help you all?
Well, I really don't think that you can do this if you don't have a supportive spouse. And, I don't know if Terry knew what a first down was when I first started dating her. I know she didn't know what it was when we were in 7th grade science camp when we met, but she thinks she can coach a team better than me now. I do know that. So she's come a long ways. But, really, there's so much time involved in it. And, being a coach, especially in college, and this is probably not true in the NFL, which was one of the things that I didn't necessarily like about coaching in the NFL, is it really is more than a job. It's almost a way of life. The kids, the players on the team, the relationships that you have with them, the support that you need, the direction. I mean, you're almost in partnership with their parents in terms of helping them be more successful in life. I'm talking about as people, as students, career development, players, the whole thing. So if you don't have sort of everyone in your family sort of all into that, it makes it really, really hard, A, for them to understand, and B, like a lot of our players have a really good relationship with Miss Terry, and they meet or they come to the house when we recruit them, and that sort of starts a relationship, and it goes on and on and on. So, and I think the players need that. That they need that sort of wholesome family. We have 12, 15, 20 players for Thanksgiving dinner because our players can't ever go home for Thanksgiving because we always play in Auburn on that weekend. And so, and if you have someone who's not all into that, and the same thing in recruiting. The parents want to know from the other parents, or is this going to be a safe place where my young man is going to develop like I'd like for him to, and are you going to give him the direction to do it? And are your principles and values of your own family and the people in your family really, what we're looking for our young men? So it's really, really important. I don't think you could do it, not in college and probably not in high school, if you don't have someone who is supportive. I think in the NFL, because you don't have the same relationship with the players, it's more all about just the football part of it. They have their own lives, they have their own children, they have their own families. So that part of it's probably not as important. You're probably not trying to develop those types of things. And it really is a significant partnership that can be a real benefit. And it's certainly been a benefit to me in my career to have Terry and our family be supportive. And it's hard on your kids too, man.
Sure.
How would you like it if you grew up and nobody said who you were? They just said, that's Nick Saban's son, or that's Nick Saban's daughter. That's hard on them too. And, and the kids have been really good about understanding that and understanding there's good and bad that go with it. But the people here, that's one thing I love about Alabama. The people here have been really, really heartfelt, warming to us and our family, and it hasn't been a negative thing for us to have to live through personally.
Since we've gotten in this direction, a question. You often hear rock stars talk about this and so on. Life in that fishbowl of attention. How long did it take you to understand and accept that and be comfortable with it, if you are comfortable with it, that everything you do is documented, whether it's by the media, by social media, by whatever? Is it tough living that way?
Not really. I mean, I don't pay any attention to it, so it's kind of, that's why I don't have social media. I don't know what anybody's saying on social media. I don't know what anybody's saying on Twitter. I don't really need for somebody to say something to motivate me or understand what the challenges are in terms of what I'm doing personally or professionally. You know, sometimes, and I think what we've done is we have our lake house. We have a place in Florida. We enjoy each other's company. So we find a lot of happiness in our privacy that we get from wherever.
Sure.
And I think that where you make a mistake is you have to understand there's a lot of conditional relationships that you have, right, which means the relationship is conditional on you being the coach, and it's conditional on you winning when you're a coach. All right, I mean, that's a conditional relationship, and it can be a lot of fun and nice and have a lot of good friends. And then you have, people who are really friends, maybe
Sure.
lifelong friends and people that you grew up with or have a relationship with here, sort of outside of football almost. And, most of the places that we've ever coached or been, we have lifelong friends. And I think they would be our friends if we won or lost the game. And I think, you have to sort of understand all that and accept it and not resent it. It's just a part of it.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, I think it's hard for the people around you sometimes, when you say, all right, let's go out and eat, and you go out and eat and you want to be with your kids or whatever, and people want to take pictures and that
Sure.
type of thing. It doesn't bother me, because in my mind, if nobody's asking me for an autograph or nobody's asking to take a picture, then I know I really got problems.
That's when you got trouble. Yeah.
I got trouble.
Yep.
All right, so it doesn't bother me, but it does bother them sometimes.
Interesting answer. Very, very good answer. Let's go to Roger on the phone in Montgomery. Roger, thanks for joining us. Good evening. Hello? Yes, sir, Roger. Go right ahead, sir. You're on with the coach.
Hey, Roger.
Hello, Coach.
How you doing?
How you doing, sir?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Well, I know you are. I mean, no reason for me to ask that, but I raised up in a family of 6 children, and 3 of us from Alabama, 3 of us from Tennessee. But we've all started wearing Alabama hats and Alabama outfits and Alabama shoes and whatever you put on with Alabama. What I'm trying to say is, Coach, I meant to get a hold of you or somebody to wish you happy birthday, because my brother's birthday was the same birthday yours was on Halloween.
Well, tell him we said happy birthday.
But, well, I will. And but I was just curious. When y'all come out, no. First of all, I want to say, people have been saying that y'all are scared going down there and doing all that, hooping and hollering and going on. Well, Coach, I know your expertise, and I know that you're well aware of what the situation is, and I know that you've got some excellent 110% players. But I'm not really worried about all that. But I will call the score. 24 are probably nothing first half, but that's all I'm going to say about that. But what I want to really say is that you, when y'all come out on the field, the referee's going to pitch that coin up in the air. And he's going to say heads or tails. He's going to look at one team or the other. y'all receive or whatever. If y'all win the toss, which way you think you might go on that deal, Coach?
Well, to be honest with you, I hope we elect to kick ass is what I hope we do, but I usually don't really decide that until, we get a little closer to the game, because we always take the weather into account as to whether the wind and the weather conditions as to, whether we, take the ball first or wait to get us possession in the second half. So, we haven't really decided that yet, so I can't really share that with you.
What a good question, and thank you for joining us on the phone from down there in Montgomery. Ben, go right ahead, sir.
Right. I think most people know that you went to Kent State and played there, and that's where you got your start in coaching. I don't know if most people know that you were there at the same time as Jack Lambert, the former Steeler great. I was wondering if you had any memories of him or any stories about him from his college days.
Oh, yeah, I got plenty of stories. Some I can tell, some I can't tell. But, Jack was a great player. And, there's a really interesting story that Jack Lambert always played defensive end for us, and he only weighed about 205 pounds. But he was a really good player, but he always played with his hand in the dirt. And we had this guy named Bob Bender, who was the middle linebacker, and he was a really good player. And we went to a Rolling Stones concert, all of us, and we used to get paid $50 for being security guard. And somebody said Bob Bender got hired to be Mick Jagger's bodyguard. And so when we came back to report to camp about 2 weeks later, to start in August in camp, Bob Bender never showed up. So they moved Jack Lambert to linebacker. He was a junior then, and he made All-American 2 years in a row, and obviously is in the Hall of Fame for what he did with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But
Sure.
We won a championship when we were playing together, and Gary Pinkel was on our team too. Those guys are 1 year behind me in school, but Don James did an incredible job of putting a team that was not very good for a long time together, and in just the second year, we won a championship.
Jack Lambert started at middle linebacker for 4 Super Bowl winning teams. Not many guys can have that on their resume.
Not at all, and he was an outstanding pro player. But I would say the one thing about that guy that I'll never forget is he might have been the most relentless, fierce competitor I've ever been around.
Really?
And he affected everybody around him that way, and he did it in the NFL as well.
Sure did. We're coming right back. More of the Nick Saban Show on this Thursday evening, so don't you leave us now. To Jacobs, up the middle, touchdown, Alabama. Oh, Josh Jacobs, another guy who has remarkable abilities for the Crimson Tide. 8 rushing touchdowns already this year. He has 55 carries, 267 yards. And Ben, one of the key things is with Jacobs and Najee Harris and Brian Robinson and Damian Harris, Ronnie Clark, and of course early in the year when Jerome Ford played his 4 games, it really is keeping the running backs relatively fresh as we get down the stretch here, which is, there's nobody doing a Derrick Henry and carrying the ball 90 times over a couple of weekends.
Right. I think sometimes people forget that guys like Derrick were really the exception here and not the rule. Maybe because there were 2 Heisman winners at running back. I believe Alabama has the last 2 running backs to win the Heisman Trophy. The school kind of gets a reputation as having guys who are going to pound it out every game there, and I think they can do that. But obviously, the way they've been able to distribute the carries has been really effective at keeping all 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys fresh so far this season.
And that's going to be part of the storyline, of course, this weekend. Alabama having shown the ability to score early. LSU hasn't given up a first quarter touchdown since the Bama game last year. They've gone 12 games in a row without allowing a touchdown in the first quarter. Coach Nick Saban, let's go back to the Nick Saban Show blog on AL.com. Glenn in Clarksville, Tennessee says, hey, Coach, Irv Smith Jr. has been impressive in his development this season. How has he improved since his freshman season to become such a valuable offensive weapon?
Well, we really had high hopes for Irv right off the bat. We thought he was an outstanding player in high school, and Tight end is kind of an interesting position now because used to be just a guy that played beside the tackle with his hand in the dirt.
Yep.
That was a tight end. All right, well now a tight end is a guy that can do that, a guy that can play off the ball and do fullback type things, and a guy that can split out and be a wide receiver, at the same time. And the one thing I think Irv has is he has a skill set that allows him to do all those things, pretty well. And he's a really good receiver. He's a good blocker, very athletic, and runs well after the catch. So we always had high hopes for him. So it was just a matter of him developing, sort of the knowledge and experience that he needed to go out there and be confident and productive. And he's certainly done that and had an outstanding year this year.
It's amazing how the game has changed. A few weeks ago at your Nick at Noon luncheon, you acknowledged some of the former lettermen who were in attendance, and Martin Houston was there. And Martin said, I played a position that doesn't exist anymore. He was a great fullback. It's amazing how the game has changed, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, two-back runs are almost a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Although some of the plays that are run, they look as if there's not two backs in the backfield. But for those old-timers like me that are out there, when you play, there were two-back runs. They're really the same runs as what we did then. They just look a little different.
I gotcha. Coach, a visitor here at the restaurant with a question for you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hey, Coach. Thinking about all your years coaching until now, what's changed more, the game or the players that play the game?
I think probably both. I mean, everybody that watches football can see how much football has changed probably in the last 15 years. Dramatic change from I-pro and I-slot to multiple formations, spread, make you defend 53 yards wide and 100 yards deep. Quarterback runs, there was a time when people never wanted a quarterback to run. Now a quarterback's a significant part of a lot of RPOs and a lot of reads that he may end up being the runner. So the game has changed dramatically, and I think RPOs probably changed it as much as anything, and I think the change of the rule of illegal man downfield to 3.5 yards from 1 yard probably is what was the advent of that development and coaches who took advantage of that. So the game has changed dramatically. I think young people have changed, and anybody who's a parent out there or who has young people, they've changed. They're exposed to so much more. The internet, ability to communicate and get self-gratification from so many different sources, whether it's texting, Twitter, or whatever it is, changes people's ability to develop relationships, to be able to communicate, and really to be able to focus on process, because everybody gets such immediate self-gratification from almost everything they do. And, to be good at something, especially a sport, you have to be really process-oriented. Like, okay, here's what I want to be. Here's what I have to do to be it. Now I got to have the discipline to do it and execute it every day. And that's not something that it's something that I grew up with. But I don't know that everybody grows up with that right now, and because our culture has just changed. I'm not saying it's changed for the worse, it's just changed. And I think the way you coach, the way you teach. When I played, I would do whatever the coach said. If you tell a guy to do something now, you better give him a reason why he needs to do it, because he's probably not just going to do it just because you said to do it. And it's got to mean something to him. There's got to be some value and benefit for him. So I think it's changed a lot in both regards.
Ben, why don't you jump in again?
Right. I have to kind of set this question up, so if you'll just humor me for a second here. I was watching a documentary about the Vietnam War from PBS the other day, and one of the things that one of their experts suggested was that one of the problems that the Pentagon had during the war was that they couldn't measure the things that were important. They couldn't measure the way that the South Vietnamese people felt about their government or the way they felt about the North Vietnamese. And so the things that they could measure, like how many bridges they've blown up or casualties or how many weapons they've recovered, they decided to make those things important and kind of emphasize those things. So for those of us who don't know the game at the same level as you, what are some things that maybe we overemphasize because we can measure them or we can see them? And what are some things that we maybe underemphasize or don't pay enough attention to because we can't really measure them very well?
I thought you were going to ask me something about the Vietnam War after all that. But,
Oh, and that's been a great question, though.
And I was around during those times, so, it was tough times. It was really tough times for a lot of folks. Well, I think that a lot of people look at statistics and over-evaluate a lot of statistics about and really measure a player's ability by what his statistics are. An example would be, you could be a receiver and you have a lot of catches, but maybe you're not a good blocker. Maybe you don't play well without the ball. So maybe you're not as good a player as somebody else at your position who doesn't have as many catches for as many yards. But yet, what a lot of people look at, including your profession, the media, is strictly the stats. The guy threw for 300 yards. He must be really, really good. But there may have been some circumstances that surrounded that. And they look at another quarterback and says he only throws for 200 yards and he doesn't have as good a completion percentage. But maybe in the system he plays in, he's even a more effective quarterback than the other guy. So, and there's only certain stats that really impact the outcome of a game. And some stats don't at all, like sacks. I mean, there's all kinds of studies and there's all kind of analytics in football now that you can get and read about. And it says, all right, what's important to winning and losing? And a lot of NFL teams spend a lot of time on this. You hear it in pro baseball. All right, how many times a guy gets on base and all that and how valuable that is. So some stats are very valuable and some stats are not. Like turnovers is probably the number one statistic, turnover ratio. The next one is explosive play ratio. But yet, sacks is way down the line, how many sacks you get. I know I like to get sacks. One thing sacks do is they usually stop drives because it puts the other team behind the down and distance. All right, but to you guys, if we don't have a lot of sacks, that becomes a big deal.
Heart and toughness. Is it experience in your role that allows you to measure that kind of stuff?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to measure. I mean, I think anybody could. I mean, a football player is like a gladiator, man. I mean, they got a helmet on. You don't know what they look like. All right, but you can make a character judgment by how they compete and how they play, the kind of effort they give on the field, how much it means to them. I mean, it's not hard to see. I mean, it's not like you got to be some kind of great coach or a genius or have 25 years experience coaching to be able to see if a guy's a good competitor or not, or if he'll be responsible and do his job and you can trust the guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's hard to win with players you put on the field that you can't trust. You can't trust them to do what they're supposed to do, no matter how athletic they are. So I think all these things contribute to guys being able to play winning football, which is what's going to help you get the statistics that you need that are going to help you win.
Coach, another visitor here at the restaurant with a question for you. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Nick Saban. First off, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
And my question to you is, given the program's success over the past, many years, how do you keep yourself and the team from avoiding complacency, especially given with social media being so prominent in today's society?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest challenges in my job. Not so much for me. I mean, I'm like, this game that we're playing is the most important thing going on, and getting the players ready to play that game is the most important thing. And I'm not really affected much by what other people think or say, because I feel like I'm evaluating what we need to do and how we need to do it and what it's going to take for us to be successful day in and day out. I don't need somebody else to sort of evaluate that for me, and I don't want to be affected by what other people think. But for the players, I think it's really, really hard. And, like one time early in the season, I said, I wish somebody would write something bad about our team. All right, because I don't really like it that the players, they're young people, they get affected by things. But the statement that I made earlier here, that newspapers aren't going to run the ball for you, the crowd's not going to score any points, all these external factors, they're meaningless when it comes to how you perform and how you play. And you're really only good as the next play. And I think people have heard me say this many times before, complacency creates a blatant disregard for doing what's right. If you don't do what's right and you don't create the right habits, then it's going to affect your performance. And when that starts happening on your team, bad things start happening. Players expect to have success, start not having success. They get frustrated. They're not competing. There's going to come a time in this game. The game will reveal who you are. There'll come a time in this game when you have to choose. Am I going to persevere? Am I going to fight through it? And am I going to continue to be relentless, or am I going to give in because it's hard? Some people have a greater capacity for that than others. But to think that you're really good, arrogance is not going to help you win. All right, so everybody's got to understand that. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have with all of our players. And what I try to get them to understand is they're creating value for themselves by how they play. We have a lot of guys on our team that have made it in the NFL. We got a lot of guys on our team that want to play in the NFL someday. So if you're not the best version of yourself and you don't create a standard for how you want to play, and you challenge yourself to do that all the time, then how are you helping yourself? Just like I got on the offense yesterday because they weren't practicing very well, and they said, well, it's just the scout team. And I said, okay, so now the scout team, who's not the best players on the team, it's the third team defense. That's the standard that you play to. That's who determines how good you are, the guy you're playing against. So if you're getting evaluated by somebody and there's some pro scout here watching you play, that means he thinks you're not very good because you're just as good as the third team guy. So what's that say about who you are? And how are you getting better? And what kind of habits are you creating? So is the standard based on who you're playing against? Is it based on the competition? Is it based on the challenge? Or is it based on who you are? What kind of standard do you have for what you want to do and how you want to do it? And it doesn't matter who you're playing against. It doesn't matter what the score is. Do you play different when you're ahead by 20 or behind by 20? Shouldn't. Not if the standard is to be the best player you can be.
As he throws wide open, Ruggs makes the grab over the shoulder. He's at the 5. He is in. Touchdown, Alabama.
That, of course, en route to the 58-21 victory over the Tennessee Volunteers. Henry Ruggs averaging 18.5 yards per reception with a long catch of 57 yards against Texas A&M this season. Young man from Lee High School down in Montgomery, Ben. He is, watching these guys develop has really been a treat over the season and all over the seasons for some of these fellas.
Yeah, all 3 or 4 of them. We talked about Jalen Waddle earlier. Now we're talking about Henry Ruggs, and it could just as easily be Jerry Jeudy, who's leading the team in receptions and yards and touchdowns. It could probably just as easily be Irv Smith that we had a question about earlier as well.
Exactly. So that's one of the advantages the Tide has. Somebody was talking the other day on a show about, the best. And you hate to compare. You can't compare Julio Jones and Amari Cooper and these guys, but as a unit, man, this is a potent wide receiving unit. No question about that.
Right. When I covered Florida State, the team that won the national championship in 2013 had Rashad Green, Kelvin Benjamin, Kenny Shaw, and Nick O'Leary at tight end. That was a fun group to watch, and this has been a really good group to see, too.
So the coach joining us now for our final few moments of the show. And, of course, as we wind our way down, our final words from the coach are presented each week by Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. Coach, this hour has flown by. What are your final thoughts for the night?
Well, I think that everybody really realizes that this is a big game. I think it's a new season for us in terms of we put ourselves in a position to have an opportunity over the last 4 games, this LSU game being the biggest one, the highest ranked team that we played. And I think this game is going to be a real test of who we are, who we are as a team, how we compete in tough circumstances. It's a tough place to play. They got a really good team. They're going to try to be more physical. We're going to try to be more physical. So there's going to be a time in a game where it's going to test your resolve as a competitor and your perseverance to keep on fighting. And that's the one thing that I think that our team is got a challenge because we haven't been in a game like that. I'm happy with the way our guys have competed, but we haven't been in a game like that. So You know, it's about the 60 minutes you play, but it's also about the 1 minute at the end of the game in terms of how you feel, in terms of what you did, how you accomplished things, were you successful, were you unsuccessful, and I think this is a game that you get a tremendous amount of self-gratification for, but you also have to do a lot of really hard things when it comes to effort, toughness, perseverance, and intangibles to compete in an atmosphere like we're going to have to compete in, against a team that we're going to have to compete in, and we're going to have to challenge ourselves to stay focused on what we need to do to not really have calm in the midst of chaos, but be able to keep your poise and play the next play with great effort and intensity, but do it for 60 minutes in the game. So it's going to, you know, I'm really looking forward to it because I think it's going to tell us a lot about our team.
Indeed so. These are the kind of games we get into this business for. Coach, thanks as always for your time. Ben, the same to you. Ben Jones in the Tuscaloosa News. Travel safely, gentlemen.